So hi, and first question is going to be a simple one. Could you introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. So my name is Olivier Proux. I'm the producer of Deus Ex, Mankind Divided.
Okay, great. So sequel to well, a very successful game, I would say. That was long awaited when it was released. Can you maybe clarify the world state following Human Revolution and tell us which ending you decided to follow and why you did that? You made that choice.
Sure. So we're picking up the story 2 years after the events of Human Revolution. So at the end of that game, into this kind of huge frenzy, and a lot of death and destruction happens. This big event in the world, and 2 years later now, people are scared of augmented people. They're being treated as like second-class citizens, and so there's a lot of segregation. Hence, kind of the title "Mankind Divided," and obviously that's a huge kind of debate in our world. What should we do with these people? So that's kind of the main setting. In terms of the 4 endings that were available in Human Revolution, what we did is it's a bit of everything that we're using. Our philosophy is that when a huge event like this happens, people like you and me, we don't really know exactly what happened. There's a lot of misinformation and politics around it, so it's a bit murky, and so we kept things like this to set the tone for our game. Adam Jensen obviously is back. He really wants to take matters into his own hands at this point. He wants to investigate what happened, get deeper into the conspiracy, see who's pulling the strings. So that's where we pick things up in this one.
Okay, and can we know more about the ways the maps are structured now in this sequel? Are there still loading screens? Did you find a way to manage to support a seamless type of design? Or?
It's still very much a game that we have different areas, and you can load between areas. Obviously, we work hard so that the loading screens are minimal and fast. In terms of the actual size of the levels, or the approach that we have with level design, with the new generation of consoles and the engine that we've built for this game, we're able to build much bigger environments for the player. And Deus Ex is great the way you can sort of multipath and choose how you can approach your challenge. And now with bigger levels, you have more verticality. Also, there are more circular levels, so the way you enter an area, it's not just the front door, that's an option, but you can go the back door, you can go from the basement, from the top, and a lot of our environments, they're set into as a sub-location of a bigger hub. So you can navigate through the streets of our hub, and then you see an area. There's a lot of ways to approach it. A little bit like we did with the police station in Human Revolution. We kind of replicate that a lot in our game.
Okay, you said the engine is in-house? So
yes, it's an in-house engine. We call it the Down engine. This was a big challenge for the team to develop our own technology. But for us, it was really important that we can bring a Deus Ex title to the new generation of consoles that have our own tools and the right sort of graphic capabilities to really produce the rich environments that are important for a Deus Ex game. When you walk into a room in a Deus Ex game, the room tells you a story. Everything's kind of handcrafted, and there's a lot of details and clutter, and even just the light effects and the fog effects are important for the setting. So to have our own engine to be able to produce that level of detail was important for us.
Well, the interiors were pretty highly detailed, even in the first, well, not the first one, the Human Revolution. And I remember the desk with all the objects on it and telling a story in their own way.
Exactly.
And I was also wondering about you talking about developing on next-gen consoles. A lot of people, all they are talking about now is resolution and frame rate and stuff like that. Is it difficult to develop the game on PS4, Xbox One? Is it the same? Do you have
Well, we get those new consoles, we get more memory, more processing power, better graphics cards, and at first we're like, yeah, we can do anything. And then the level designers, the level artists, the design team, the lighting artists, they all go, crazy. So there's a lot of things that go into the game, and so we're always in a situation where, okay, now we have to keep checks and balances and make sure that we hit our targets in terms of the frame rate and the loading times, and we always find ways to really fill the new constraints. But that's cool. We push it as far as we can in terms of the technology, but also the time that we have to produce really rich and believable and credible environments. That's really important for a Deus Ex game.
Okay, well, great. And well, I don't know if it's a politically correct question to ask. As far as Xbox One is concerned, is it more difficult, or do you think DirectX 12 will help you, even things out with the PS4 version, or?
The way we approach it, we work on both consoles, as we don't have like a lead platform, either PS4 or Xbox One. Both are in the same ballparks. There's strengths and weaknesses, like very minute on both sides. So but they're very similar compared to what the developers had to live through on the previous generation of console. The PS3 had different ways, obviously, as we all know, to manage memory and things like that. Now it's much more it's much more consistent. So we approach both consoles as lead consoles. So IDOS Montreal, that we work on the Xbox One and PS4 version. We work with a partner called Nexus to develop the PC version. So we want to hit the 3 platforms when the game comes out, and we want the game to be consistent in terms of visuals and frame rate across all platforms.
Okay, so let's talk combat. I know that combat is not what people have in mind when talking about Deus Ex. You want to be stealthy and everything, but in the Human Revolution, combat was the way combat was done. You couldn't use the triggers because you had so many things you could do in the game. So did you keep the same controls, or is it a bit more natural to aim down with a gun? Can you use the triggers, things like that?
Yeah, everything that relates to the controls and the combat pillar of the game. This was one of the early objectives of the dev team, and we made a lot of improvements to combat. And it's not like we want to make it a combat game or easier game. It's more along the lines of, I think Deus Ex, sometimes it can be perceived as a stealth game. That we don't think so. I think it's more, the player has a lot of freedom into how he wants to play.
More like a bit like sandbox.
It is, and
like create your experience.
Well, as a player, you have so many tools at your disposal. You can be kind of creative in how you approach different situations. And we felt that stealth was great, and that's awesome. We want to keep it strong. But if combat was a bit more clunky, the controls were not as fluid, and you didn't have as many tools, and well, the combat offer wasn't up to the level, so that the element of choice and creativity was a bit hindered by the fact that combat wasn't at the same level. So now, by giving new augmentations and revamping the controls, hopefully people will feel that if they are playing stealth, they get in a tough situation, they can now use combat, and they can keep the flow of their game. They don't have to feel like they have to reload because they don't like the gunplay.
Yeah, so whether it's combat or stealth, you need good AI, and there's always a delicate balance. There's gray area between being spotted right immediately after you enter the room, or being allowed to just free roam the room easily. So what did you do with the AI this time?
AI is always a big challenge when you develop a game. If the AI is too smart, your systems are so sophisticated that as a player it's not fun, because you can't really read the situation. They move too fast, so you can't settle down and start like doing things with them. So we make sure that we have that balance, that they do smart things, but at the same time that the player can read the situation. So we really work hard. Each map has its own intricacies, and each map needs the AI to be balanced accordingly. That's something we do. We play test a lot. We have players coming in, because we can't be really a good judge anymore as the dev team. We're so used to the system. So we have play testers. We observe them behind the glass, take notes, ask them questions, and kind of refine and iterate for each map. Also, something that works really well with the AI systems is just the credibility. If you have the AI kind of move around without talking to each other, that's kind of an experience, but you're not really immersed. But if they start like barking at each other and barking at you, and this creates a whole new level. So with the audio team is very much involved, and maybe when you play a game, it's not something you think about, but that sort of the bark system, how they talk to each other, has a huge impact on your perception of the credibility of the AI. So with the audio team, that's something we try to refine. We have a very advanced kind of bark system that will help the players be really immersed into their interactions with the enemies.
And will, for example, a guard, because that's usually happens in stealth game, you know, like there's a guard and then you take him down, then you hide the body, and then his friend doesn't realize that he's gone. So because, you know, it's a choice, because then it can make things more complicated. So what would be in Mankind Divided?
So that's a good example that if you want to be super realistic about it, you could approach the AI system into noticing these things, but it could have an impact, or how, like, you can't be really a predator anymore. You can't really take the challenge the way you want. So we make some compromises sometimes on it's not a simulation.
No.
So yeah, those things might not be supported, but we have other systems, more like a disturbance and these things that you can use to your advantage or create tension for the player. We want also to work really hard on how the AI NPCs kind of patrol an area, how they look through different areas, and how what paths they use. So for the player, it's always kind of a puzzle to solve, right? When you approach things stealthily.
Yeah, so this is like a puzzle game, actually. One of the complaints that was made to the first game was maybe that the boss fights could only be, you know, well, fought, basically. You couldn't just talk your way out of them. And I know that you've said that this would be different this time, which was, yeah, it was different in the DLC that for Human Revolution already. What will be possible in terms of, you know, tackling the situation? Will you be able to be stealthy? Will you be able to, yeah, talk? Well, how will it work?
Talking, no. We have those like very important debates with important characters. That's one thing. Like the boss situations are something else. But you know, the question I would ask, and something that we ask ourselves, is for a Deus Ex game in 2015. What does it mean to have boss fights? Like, do we really need boss fights?
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah, there was, you know, the expression, for lack of a better word, you know, like big guys, well, important guys in the storyline.
Exactly. So that's kind of how we treat them. They're you have obviously, you know, more like important characters, and they have different situations in the gameplay. But the way we approach it is, we have to make it consistent with our gameplay system and make it consistent with how the player likes to play his game. If you're stealth and non-lethal, you know, why would I impose you a way to play? You know, what happened in Human Revolution, I think that there was a lot of sort of production constraints that happened, that they kind of had to make that decision. It wasn't up to their vision that they had back then, and there's a lot of corrections that were made with the director's cut. So I think the dev team is really aware of making sure that the game stays true to its pillars and to how the player wants to play.
Okay, so combat and stealth, it's, you know, you think abilities and all the things, that the stats that Jensen will have. Any changes to you know, what was in the first game?
Yeah, there's I mean, we make tweaks to the systems, like the energy system, for example. We had a few concerns with it, and some players and even ourselves, we looked at it, and it was sometimes a little bit difficult to understand or difficult to exploit it, so you can actually use your augmentation. So now we have a bit more flexible energy system. It's a balancing act. We don't want players to be overpowered with their augmentations, but we want them to actually use them. You know, the way you're going to acquire experience points and leading to praxis, we want to make sure that either stealth or combat, you're going to have, there's not like a more rewarding way to play. If you play combat, it's like you're going to get little nuggets of experience point as you kill the NPC. If you play stealth, you're going to have maybe like a bigger sort of reward at the end of the level, and we try to balance both approaches, that they're fair, and whatever way you want to play, we don't want the system to tell you, hey, this is the better way to play or wrong way to play.
So you won't be able to fully max out Jensen, like I don't think you could before.
No,
you have to make choices, right?
You have to make choices. You can't have 100% of the tech tree unlocked at the end of one playthrough, and that relates back to I was talking about choice and consequences, but there's the consequence part.
The choices you make in the game also, and the dialogue system, has it been improved?